This is Beyond the Weekend, a podcast of Cornerstone Church, where we dig into the things we didn't have time for on Sunday. Welcome to BTW. Welcome to this week's episode of Beyond the Weekend. I'm Mandy Fowler, Director of Spiritual Formation for Cornerstone, and today I'm being joined by Betsy Marvin, who's our Senior Director of Discipleship. Welcome, Betsy.
Thank you. Good to be here.
And you wrote and preached this message at 84th Street yesterday. And we're in, what is this week? That was week 7?
It was week 7
of Redefined. And we were in Matthew chapter 6 with kind of I think a famous passage.
Yeah, I think a lot of people know this one, and a lot of songs written about it.
Right.
In fact, just this last week on the radio, there's a new song about it, which I was like, oh, it's kind of funky. It's kind of like upbeat.
Interesting.
I know. I can't remember the name.
Isn't like His Eyes on the Sparrow come from this passage?
Yes.
Yeah. There's some really classic.
Turn Your Eyes on Jesus.
Yeah. Yep. There's some good songs written about this. But we are talking about worry, which is a very, I'd say, relevant topic for all of us, no matter what stage of life we're in, what age we are at. We heard from some of our students, which was great, about the role of worry in their lives. What did you, as you were writing this message, let's just talk about that word worry a little bit.
Yeah, this was one the teaching team really struggled, like, what does it really mean? And literally, it's dwelling on difficulties or troubles. So it's the dwelling that causes the worry. So anxiety then is when it becomes something that you physically feel as well as think. And that's kind of one of the steroid element of going from worry to anxiety. And anxiety for some, honestly, is a chemical thing. It's how their brains are made. And so having counseling or having medication to help your mind handle it is totally okay.
Right.
Like some of us are just made differently. Like some are worst case scenario thinker people.
Yeah.
It's just how you're made. And so to know that your mind naturally goes to the worst case scenario, for some, it goes to the way, way, way worst case scenario. And so to have some help with your mind is okay.
Right. Yeah. We're never suggesting that you can simply pray away some of these things. Yeah, if you've got a very serious medical condition where, you need help for that. So we just wanted to preface the conversation with that because some types of anxiety need additional help.
Yeah. And I feel like Jesus is talking to the everyday worry.
Yeah.
And even in anxiety, like we may not be someone who's prone to it to a medical level, but we're all going to hit it at some point. Something's going to happen that pushes us beyond a normal just worry situation.
Right, like sleepless nights. And
and knowing there are a few tools that can help us because our minds are so complicated.
Yeah.
And so when Jesus is talking worry here, I'm sure there were people that were listening that were anxious. And so they had to take it in with how they would process that. So the word in the Greek, literally the word means distracted that Jesus uses for worry. And so, and then there's some connotation within the tenses that, I don't understand all that, but I read about it. So it's like a negative distraction, not a positive. So it's a negative distraction that pulls your mind toward whatever it is. What am I going to eat? What am I going to wear? And allowing it to distract you to such a point that it takes your mind off what it should be on.
Oh, that's so interesting. I think, we don't have any distractions, do we?
Oh, yeah, no. News, social media, family, bills, life, work.
We even have screens blasting news at us at the gas pump.
Yes.
Like there's just a constant sort of steady stream of headlines or, so if you weren't worried,
you would be.
You can become worried about something at any moment.
And before we started, we were chatting about this and it's like the marketing ploy now.
Yeah.
Like if I can put something out there that might make you wonder, should I be worried about that?
Yeah.
Then I'm going to tune in to watch to see if I should be worried about it.
Or click through or,
And then more information makes me feel like I might be less worried when more information sometimes makes us more worried.
True. Well, we were chatting about this a little bit. Like, it is kind of a function of our culture that companies make more money out of us if we're concerned about something, if we're trying to solve a problem, or we're, and news definitely gets money from us if we click on things, so it's kind of in their best interest to keep us in a state of concern or worry or distraction.
So concern then, I think at one service more than the other, I made it a little more clear. Concern is taking worry to an action point and shifting it. So worry dwells, which often brings a fear, or there's a fear that brings the dwelling on the trouble. Concern is looking for an option or a solution that I can actively do, knowing that I won't be able to do everything, that some things are left to God. For instance, if I'm worried about getting sick, I can shift to being concerned and do things, take my vitamins, make sure I'm washing my hands well. Like I can take an active solution toward not being worried about that, because I'm not really in control of if I'm going to catch a germ I can never see, but I can do things to help myself, right? And so that should help me move forward versus sit in the worry of it.
Dwelling on it, spiraling.
Yeah. That's why we do medical exams, right? To make sure our insides are healthy, because we can be worried about what's going on in us, or we can actively go to the checkups so that we're just concerned, and then we learn the information.
Yeah. Well, that brings up a good point, because we were also chatting beforehand about, what is ours to do, kind of looking at something. So like maybe let's walk through, like so germs is a good one, but say you're worried about a job interview coming up. How do you kind of shift that into like how do you bring that to God in a way, in a good way?
Yeah, actually, even yesterday, the students were nervous, and I said, at some point, you've done the prep work. So, a job interview, do your prep work.
Right.
That's a solution. Yeah. That's an option. You can sit and worry about it, or you can learn about the company. You can Google best questions asked in an interview and prepare for what might come your way. Right. And then leave to God what's God's. Like, Lord, however this goes, it's going to be in your hands. And I'm going to do the best I can. Right. But the outcome is yours. And I think even for yesterday, often when I speak, I just pray over the chairs, like, Lord, help people hear what they need to hear, even if I don't say it. Yeah. So it's like in an interview, help that person to see who I really am, whether I actually say it or not. Like that's a Holy Spirit thing.
Yeah. And ultimately, there's only so much that's in our control and a lot that's not. And so we kind of have to, and I think that is what kind of brings us anxiety, because we do have so much under our control in 2024 America. There's a lot, probably, I would say more than any society that's ever lived. We have more under control in terms of how our day goes or how our life goes. And yet mostly it's not under our control. There's so much that we simply can't control. And yet I think that brings so much worry because of that. We kind of just want to reach this hypothetical place where like everything's good. Yeah. But that we can't ever reach that. No. It doesn't exist. No. It doesn't exist in this world, on this side of heaven.
Right. And so when Jesus says, on earth as it is in heaven, he wants us to walk into that kingdom way of living and thinking, knowing that until we're truly with him, we're not going to experience it perfectly, but we will experience the blessings of walking in it.
Yeah. Why do you think, so we talked about this a little bit beforehand too, why do you think humans are the way we are? Like, no, why do we, just thinking about, like, if you look across the Old Testament, the story of the people of Israel and God doing things for them and coming through for them. And yet there is pretty consistently still like doubting that he will this time, or, wanting to go back to where they were because they at least knew what was going to happen.
We like safe.
Yeah.
We like knowing.
Yeah.
And so even though Jesus may have parted God may have parted the Red Sea, when we come to water again, will he do it for us?
Right.
Like there's it's too good to be true, but there's also can I really trust it? Which I think is something that's just part of our sin nature.
Yeah.
Satan would much rather us be distracted and focused on how I can fix it, knowing that that's only going to push me farther into control and distraction. then trusting. And I think the other thing, especially when I think of the Israelites, is how long it took God to answer some of that.
Yeah.
And so if he parted the Red Sea, it's not until 100 years later, right, that they're calling on a God who parted the Red Sea. And so the people who actually saw it, and I think that's our same thing.
Yeah.
We're like, okay, but I didn't actually see it, so can I trust it? And the element of faith that's required.
Well, and also just thinking about God tends to not do the same thing every time. And we would prefer that.
Yes.
So
because it's safe.
He likes to do unexpected things and new things. And that is also, we don't like the unpredictable. So I think that makes us feel like, but I don't know how you're going to work it out.
Yeah.
Which is it's just funny. Like in one level, I find it comforting that humans kind of just we are how we are. And we've always been this way.
Yeah.
And so I don't think we should be too hard on ourselves for tending to do that. But I do think if we're not intentional about some of this, it will just sweep us away and keep us focused on the wrong things and keep us in a state of kind of perpetual, I don't know what to call it, angst or like lack of peace.
Lack of peace. It's interesting in prepping the students and doing their videos, and because of how they were edited, you didn't hear every student say it, but every student did say, worry is when you're obsessing about something. And so when you start to feel the obsessing, that's a check. And so you have to get it out of yourself, which I thought was interesting. And they all had different ways of doing that, writing it, talking to someone. And they all included, I talked to Jesus about it, but I talked to someone safe. And when I get it out of me, then I automatically feel better. And not even that someone fixed it.
Right.
But just I stopped obsessing inside and I got it out.
Yeah.
And then that's where the light hits it and it loses its power. So I thought that was really interesting. And so we like safety, but we also internalize so much of it that if we just talk to someone about how we were feeling about it, it might shift.
Right. Well, and that requires some self-awareness.
Oh, yeah.
Of realizing,
which was amazing
of noticing.
from teenagers.
Yeah, that's wonderful to hear. That's really promising because I think, I would say over time we've gotten a little more aware of some of that and the negative impacts of obsessing over something, and so being able to call that stuff out and speak it and handle it in a more healthy way than maybe we ever have. So we have more distractions, more thrown at us, but we also have more awareness and maybe more tools for dealing with those things. So good and bad.
Good and bad. Good and bad.
But that intentionality, I think, of paying attention to yourself and asking those questions like, oh, what am I so worried about? And what am I sort of zooming in on, and maybe kind of getting to the bottom of that so that okay, what's mine to do? What do I give to God? And sort of releasing the results, because ultimately, we would love to have control over every single thing in our lives. And it's just simply not that way.
Right. I think even hearing you say that, it's what we're most worried about seems to be the outcome, because that's the piece we can't control.
Right.
And so when we're doing our part, which is the prep work, or like even in my testimony yesterday, just starting to realize I have to own some of this. I can shift some things. I can change my perspective, and we can walk in this, and it's going to be okay. But I can't control the outcome, and that's the piece we had to surrender. And that's often the piece we most want to control.
Right. Well, I love that image of, like a parent looking into the face of their child and saying, like, keep your eyes on me. What do you think, as we are in a more and more distracted culture, we hear from people all the time about how busy they are, with family stuff and kids' sports and lessons and, just activities left and right. Practically, like in the place we are in, how can we encourage people to, look into the eyes of Jesus? Like how do we cultivate habits that will help us do that?
Oh man, it's so hard when you're in the throes of busy family, but what you prioritize, you actually do. So if you really need to do some mindfulness and have some quiet, or use your time purposefully, that can become a habit over time. But so often I don't know the solution, the remedy, is what Jesus calls us to, is to slow down and rest in him and find pockets of rest and enjoy, find peace in that. In Philippians 4, which I didn't use yesterday just because it was plenty long.
Too much, yeah.
When Paul just says, be anxious in nothing, but by everything, by prayer and petition, make your requests known to God. And so I think he's on to something. Obviously, he's taking it from this teaching, from the Sermon on the Mount. Pray, seek God first, and then with thanksgiving, which I think gratitude is a big shifter as well, to remind ourselves what's good. I was just meeting with a young couple last week and just encouraged them, you drive 20 minutes to work.
Yeah.
What can you listen to?
Yeah.
Take advantage of some of those moments. Or when my daughter and I would go to long drives to play faraway sport teams, it was, what can we listen to in the car and talk about together that's purposeful, just to take advantage of, we're going somewhere, but we are in the car for an hour and a half, so let's rest and listen and have a conversation. And I think some of that is even helpful versus just, playing something random or listening to the news. Right.
Which will probably make you more anxious.
Yes.
Yeah, that's so good. Well, and I was just reflecting on, so it's hard. We are going a little bit out of order.
Yeah.
But we really encourage you to read all of chapter 5 and 6 again, just to see the flow of, Jesus, where this is taking you. And it's so intentional. I know you mentioned yesterday about the Lord's Prayer and how much that ties into this passage. And I'm just thinking, we think we are very future thinkers. We're the people of the 5-year plan, and we're, thinking of things years ahead from now. I would say much more so than that wasn't an option really for people in the first century. But it's interesting because they still must have been focused on future things, because I feel like Jesus seems very concerned for today.
Yeah. Yeah. And he's talking to a group of people who we know probably bartered more than they had money and were transient under Roman rule. So not allowed, unless you were going to bow to the Roman, you weren't going to be very wealthy. So to think about what they wore, when we know they probably had one outfit. Yeah. Right. And if they were lucky to, and what they ate was what they could raise or what they could trade for. And so it was really what they worried about. Yeah. And so to say, let's just enjoy today and be present, because tomorrow is still going to come. Right. And so as we were even chatting beforehand, those were their things. So what would Jesus say for us? Would he say, right, so don't worry about your safety and don't worry about your health. You can be concerned about those things, your retirement fund, or how your children are going to turn out. Right. We should be concerned for those things. Yeah. Meaning we should do proactively things to help those things grow well. But in the long run, to just worry about them doesn't give you another minute in your day. I even saw, it was funny because, it's always a good idea to click on the footnotes. Did you see that it said, or add one hair to your head or something like that? Oh, yeah. It's just an interesting, can't add another hour to your day or one hair to your head. Which is interesting, right? Yeah. Especially for those who wish they had more hair on their head. Yeah, but both say the same thing. Yeah, it's not productive. It doesn't do you any good. So I just think, that's so, it is hard. It's a challenge because we've got, I know even working in church world, we have to be talking about Christmas right now. And there's things that we have to there are reasons we have to think far ahead, but as much as possible when it comes to our inner lives. Right. And what we find ourselves dwelling on, to try and narrow our focus to what do we need for today. And I think even Revelation shows us that God planned a future. Jeremiah, I know the plans I have for you. Right. But worry tends to be, I'm not sure what's going to happen when I get there. Yeah. So I'm just going to worry about it versus I'm going to plan for when I get there. Yeah. Because then when I get there, I'm not going to be so worried about it. Right. Right. And so I'm not a big, I like strategy. I like having a plan. But I think I'd rather, that feels more proactive and I'm not worried about it if I'm taking an action toward it. Right. Yeah.
Well, I'm just thinking about that John, let's see, what was it? John 16:33. Yeah. In this world you have trouble, but take heart, I've overcome the world. Like to remember, like that is ultimately how things end. Yeah. And in between now and then, we are going to have trouble. It's a broken world full of broken people. And that means there isn't a mythical place where like things will just have no troubles and,
only
things
heaven.
will be, And so, but to remember like this idea of God being with us and walking closely with us and to just keep our eyes on him, I think is a great reminder for all of us. Well, we could keep talking forever, but
we could.
There's still some weeks left. We're still in the Sermon on the Mount for a few more weeks. So I hope you are continuing to listen to the sermons, do the Bible reading plan, or just keep rereading the Sermon on the Mount. Really, that is what I'm kind of having you do as I write it. But it really needs, there's so much to it. We're hardly scratching the surface, really. Just, doing a sermon on a big kind of a chunky passage every week. But so there's so much there, and I hope that you are getting a lot out of it. But thanks for being here, Betsy.
Thanks for having me.
And we will see you next week.